All right, let's get right into it. We're talking about one of the absolute giants of 20th century literature, Ernest Hemingway.
There is nothing to writing. All you do is sit down at a typewriter and bleed. Wow, talk about intense. And you know what? He really meant it. He wrote with this raw, brutal honesty that basically defined an era. But here's the kicker. His real life was even more dramatic, more chaotic, and yet way more tragic than anything he ever put on the page.
So the world knows the legend, right? But who was the actual man? I mean, when you think Hemingway, you picture this grizzled adventurer, the Nobel Prize winner, the ultimate symbol of masculinity. But the reality? Oh, it's so much more complex and frankly, a lot more troubled. It's really a story of deep, profound insecurity hiding behind this myth he built brick by brick. So let's start there. Let's look at the myth of Hemingway. This larger-than-life persona he's so carefully, so deliberately crafted. This is the Hemingway the world thought it knew.
And what a persona it was. You've got the macho icon, right? The war correspondent, the big game hunter and deep-sea fisherman, the guy who could brawl with anyone, and the heavy drinker. I mean, the stories are insane. We're talking up to 17 scotches in a single day in his 30s. This was the public image, a man who wrestled with life itself, chasing danger from the battlefields of Europe all the way to the safaris of Africa.
And he looked the part too. He was a physically imposing guy, standing 185 centimeters tall, weighing up to 130 kilos at his peak. So yeah, a true giant of literature in every single sense of the word.
But what was he hiding? Well, that's where we get to the man behind the myth. Because behind that tough, swaggering exterior was a completely different story. And it all started in this strict, wealthy home that he was absolutely desperate to escape.
And look at this contrast here. It's just so stark. On one side, the myth, fearless adventurer, ultimate man, confident genius. But the reality? Troubled, insecure, a rebellious son who was deeply, deeply scarred. And this is the key. The myth he built wasn't just for show. It was a direct reaction to the reality he was running from. It was his armor, a shield against his own anxieties.
So where did that rebellion come from? A lot of it was fueled by this really deep conflict, especially with his mother. You know, he was born into a wealthy religious family, but his mom would dress him in girls' clothes as a child, something he grew to resent fiercely. So he just rejected everything his parents stood for. He skipped college to become a journalist, and when his first big novel came out, they called it filthy and disgusting. This tension, especially with his mother, pretty much defined his entire life.
And if you want to know just how toxic that relationship was, get this. After his father committed suicide, his mother mailed him the very pistol his father used as a gift. I mean, that is just an unbelievably cruel, twisted thing to do. So yeah, it's really no surprise he never even went to her funeral.
Okay, so this deep, profound insecurity, it came out in some really strange, really aggressive ways. Like, he had this bizarre obsession with putting down his friend and rival F. Scott Fitzgerald. He even wrote in his memoir about this incident where he supposedly inspected Fitzgerald's genitals in a bathroom just to reassure him of his manhood. I mean, talk about a weird power play. It's just, wow.
Which brings us to the crucial question, right? How on earth did all of this chaos, this trauma, this deep insecurity, how did that fuel his groundbreaking art? How did he turn all that pain into literary gold?
Well, he actually told us how. He once said that the best training for a writer was an unhappy childhood. And that brings us right back to that quote from the beginning about bleeding at the typewriter. For Hemingway, that wasn't just some edgy, cynical remark. He lived it. He channeled his pain directly onto the page, using the wreckage of his own life as the raw material for his fiction.
And you can see it so clearly in his work. His most famous novels are like a roadmap of his life. In 1918, he's wounded as an ambulance driver in World War I. Then a few years later, boom, he publishes The Sun Also Rises, all about disillusioned expatriates. Then comes A Farewell to Arms, a tragic WWI love story. He reports on the Spanish Civil War, and then what happens? He publishes For Whom the Bell Tolls. He was literally processing his own trauma, the war, the lost love, all of it, through his characters.
And here's another really interesting pattern. The man was married 4 times, and his creative life was completely intertwined with his romantic life. Look at this. With Hadley, he wrote The Sun Also Rises. With Pauline, A Farewell to Arms. With Martha, For Whom the Bell Tolls. And with Mary, The Old Man and the Sea. It's almost like a new masterpiece required a new muse, or a new wife.
And his fame just exploded. It really hit its absolute peak with The Old Man and the Sea. Life magazine published the whole novel in a single issue, and it sold, get this, 5.31 million copies. in 2 days. That's just an insane number. It cemented him as an absolute global literary superstar.
But here's the thing about building a myth that big. Eventually, it can become a prison. And the final chapter of Hemingway's life, well, it's not a story of triumph. It's a truly tragic story of decline.
You know, Hemingway became the voice of what was called the lost generation. This was the generation that came of age during World War I, and they felt like all the old values just didn't matter anymore in this new, broken world. He captured that feeling perfectly. But the tragedy is, in the end, it seems like he was just as lost as any of his characters, unable to find his own way home.
His final years were just brutal. A lifetime of hard living, and then two near-fatal plane crashes in Africa. It all finally caught up with him. He was dealing with severe physical decline, chronic pain, and his drinking was out of control. He was battling severe depression and paranoia. And worst of all for him, he had debilitating writer's block. He couldn't do the one thing that defined him. He felt his masculinity, his entire identity was just fading away.
And so, at just 61 years old, the man who had survived wars, bullfights, and so many other dangers took his own life.
And the tragedy just runs so deep. It wasn't just him. It was a family tragedy. His father, his sister, his brother, and even his granddaughter also died by suicide. It was like this darkness, this curse of mental illness, haunted his entire family line, and not even his immense fame and talent were enough to outrun it.
So, that leaves us with this huge, unavoidable question, doesn't it? Was his genius forged by his trauma, or was he ultimately a victim of his own myth, destroyed by the impossible legend he felt he had to live up to? I think the answer, just like the man himself, is a fascinating and deeply human contradiction.
Okay, let's dive in. We're going to break down one of the most powerful novels of the 20th century, Ernest Hemingway's A Farewell to Arms. Now, on the surface, yeah, it's a love story set during World War I, but what's really going on underneath is a message so bleak, so profound, it literally changed the game for modern literature. So the whole story, it unfolds over just about a year, and you can track the tragedy by the seasons. It all kicks off in the spring. There's a little hope in the air. An American soldier, Frederick, meets a British nurse, Catherine. By summer, he's been wounded, and they fall deeply in love in a hospital in Milan. But then autumn hits. He has to go back to the front, gets caught in this horrifying retreat, and deserts the army just to stay alive. He and a now pregnant Catherine escape to Switzerland, thinking they're safe. But then comes winter, and in the end, their baby is stillborn and Catherine dies, leaving Frederick completely and utterly alone. Right? I mean, on the surface, it's just this incredibly bleak story, a tale of total loss where pretty much anything that could go wrong does. That doesn't exactly scream masterpiece, does it? So what is it that makes this one of the greatest novels ever written? Well, that's the mystery we're going to solve today.
All right, clue number one, and this one is fascinating. It's not really about what Hemingway says, it's all about how he says it. He was a true master of subtraction, and he had this core belief that what you leave out of a story is just as important as what you put in.
He basically pioneered a style we now call hard-boiled, and seriously, it was a revolution. It's direct, it's unsentimental, and it's incredibly concise. The whole point is to avoid telling you about emotions. He forces you, the reader, to feel it yourself, just by giving you the bare facts and the action, plain and simple.
Just look at the difference here. It's night and day. Another writer might throw all these adjectives at you. It was a beautiful, warm, and sunny day, filled with the promise of hope. Really lay it on thick. But Hemingway, he just gives you the raw data. The day was warm, the sun was out. See? He doesn't tell you how to feel. He trusts the facts to do the work. It creates this sense of stark, undeniable reality.
It's like he had this personal rule book for writing. He used short, declarative sentences. Bam, to the point. He focused on nouns and verbs, the real muscle of the language, and just got rid of all those flowery adjectives and adverbs. He just reports what happens with no emotional commentary, and it creates this powerful, almost hypnotic rhythm when you read it. And this was his whole goal: absolute clarity. He believed the story's power should come straight from the events themselves, not from some complex language or fancy words. He wanted the story to hit you directly, with no filter. Okay, so we have the style down. Let's move on to our second clue and see how this all starts to connect. Because here's the thing about that simple, bare-bones prose: everything, and I mean everything, is there for a reason. Nothing is an accident. Let's just start with the title itself, A Farewell to Arms. At first glance, it seems pretty obvious, right? A soldier saying goodbye to the weapons of war. But it's so much smarter than that. It's this brilliant little piece of wordplay. It's pointing to two farewells happening at the exact same time. On one hand, yes, it's a farewell to the arms of war, the guns, and the conflict that Frederick leaves behind. But then there's the second, absolutely heartbreaking farewell, a final goodbye to the arms of his loved one, Catherine. Her embrace was his only real shelter from the madness, and he loses that too.
And then, there's the rain. Man, the rain is everywhere in this book. It shows up constantly. Catherine is terrified of it. At one point she says, "I'm afraid of the rain because sometimes I see me dead in it." It just follows them wherever they go. This is definitely not just a weather report. Okay, so there's a fancy literary term for what Hemingway's doing here, but the idea is actually super simple. It's called an objective correlative. All that means is you use a thing, an object, a symbol, in this case rain, to represent a specific emotion. You do it over and over until you don't even need to say the feeling out loud. The reader just gets it. And this is what's so genius about it. Think about rain in most stories. It's usually about, washing things clean, new life, that kind of thing. But in A Farewell to Arms, absolutely not. 0% hope. The novel literally opens with rain bringing a cholera epidemic that kills thousands of soldiers, and it ends with Frederick walking away from the hospital all alone in the rain. It's a constant, suffocating symbol of death and despair. So this is where it all comes together. The bare-bones writing style, the relentlessly bleak symbols, these aren't just cool artistic tricks. They are the engine Hemingway uses to drive home a really, really tough philosophical message about the nature of the universe itself. You have to remember, this was the worldview of what they called the Lost Generation, the folks who survived World War I. They came back feeling like the universe wasn't just indifferent, they felt it was actively hostile. They believed that any attempt you make to find happiness or love or meaning was ultimately doomed to be crushed by a cruel random fate. And our guy, Frederick Henry, he tries to fight this. He really does. He makes what he calls a separate peace. First, he just walks away from the senseless war. Then, he tries to build this tiny, private world for himself and Catherine, a little shelter of love and meaning. But here's the brutal truth of the novel. The universe just doesn't care about his separate peace. It lets him wiggle out of the man-made trap of war, only to snap a different, even crueler one shut on him, a biological trap. Random chance takes away his child and the woman he loves. So that ending, it isn't just sad, it's the entire philosophical argument of the book made terrifyingly real. And get this, Hemingway was completely obsessed with getting this feeling of total cosmic defeat just right. He rewrote the novel's final pages over and over again. Some sources say it was 40 times, some say it was more than 60. He just kept hammering away at it until he had distilled that feeling of absolute desolation into its purest form. And all that work leads to this, the final, devastating line of the book. Just think about what's happening there. He leaves the hospital, a place of death. He walks back to a hotel, not a home, just a temporary shelter. And he's walking in the rain, that symbol of death that's been haunting them the whole time. That single sentence is the destination the entire novel was driving toward. And it leaves us with this chilling question. If love, courage, and our attempts to escape are all ultimately pointless, what is there left to hold on to?